6 months ago, I covered a drama in which the works of South Korean artist Mossacannibalis were banned from r/Imaginary Warhammer, following a series of controversial pieces related to the Warhammer 40k fandom. If you have somehow stumbled upon this video and are out of the loop, my previous video is linked in the description below. Unfortunately, Mosa has landed themselves in hot water once again, and this time it feels a little more serious. Back in early July, Mosa was forced to private their Twitter, following a series of high-profile call-out posts that resulted in the loss of more than 10,000 followers. This new drama stems from the resurfacing of a Mossacannibalis alt on a very sketchy Mastedon instance that featured numerous illustrations of minors in sexually compromising positions. Worse yet, in a situation eerily reminiscent of the Shadman Daphne Keane debacle, it was discovered that Mosa had created an illustration that referenced the sexual abuse and murder of a real-life child victim. Needless to say, this story is very dark. However, before I can get into the narrative proper, I think it's necessary I provide a little backstory about who Mossacannibalis is and why their art continues to draw controversy. Mosa is a highly prolific artist who has created thousands of pieces since the early 2010s. Their interesting blend of Western and Eastern influences, as well as their tendency towards morbid and sexual themes, makes their art instantly recognizable. This undeniable talent and frankly insane output has netted Mosa quite the following, with their largest platform, Twitter, growing well past 500,000 followers. While Mosa's work spans multiple fandoms and online niches, they are perhaps best known for reviving interest in the late 2000s Warhammer 40k meme Cultist Chan. Through Cultist Chan and their other Warhammer-related works, Mosa quickly made a name for themselves in this community, with reposts of their art blowing up on Warhammer-related Facebook groups and subreddits. Unfortunately, not everyone was a fan of Mosa's dark and occasionally lascivious approach to the source material, prompting some to take it upon themselves to search Mosa's back catalog work in search of something that would lend validity to their complaints. These searches did yield results, and it was quickly discovered that Mosa's massive body of work contained no shortage of more obviously objectionable pieces, featuring gore, sexual violence, and lolicon. Technically, it's been known that Mosa has created art like this for a long time. In the comment section of almost any repost of Mosa's art, you can find at least one person attempting to out Mosa as a sexual degenerate or deranged sicko. Despite this, up until recently, Mosa has managed to avoid significant consequences, and their rise to Twitter artist stardom has remained unhindered. I believe the inherent difficulty many run into when attempting to cancel Mosa is, for obvious reasons, you can't exactly share the offending material on mainstream platforms. For this reason, people are forced to describe the art in vague terms and hope people will visit these esoteric hentai websites to do their own research. What made this situation and the topic of this video so different was the resurfacing of an old and lesser known account, which served as a singular repository of Mosa's most depraved artistic creations. And, more importantly, the seemingly fresh discovery of a particularly distasteful piece of art that could effectively counter the apparently difficult to refute "it's just a drawing" argument. Now, the information I'm about to share with you is likely to prejudice many people against Mossacannibalis. However, I would like to state that it is not my intention with this video to cancel Mosa. I firmly believe that nobody should be deplatformed, or barred from engaging in commerce unless they have broken the terms of service of a given platform or US law. It is simply my goal to provide an accurate resource about the online discussion surrounding Mossacannibalis and their various controversies. I trust you, the audience, to absorb this information and make your own moral determinations. With that out of the way, let's get into it. As I stated previously, this new batch of call-out posts were inspired by the rediscovery of a Mossacannibalis alt account on the relatively obscure Mastedon instance Barag.net. Barag.net is a Twitter-esque platform devoted to the sharing of sexually explicit and controversial artworks, and is, by all accounts, a pretty disturbing place. While I can't speak for the website as a whole, the trending page is comprised almost entirely of lolicon. While Brag.net saw a massive spike in users following Tumblr's ban of not safe for work material in 2018, The site, as of today, only has 300,000 users. During their time on the site, Mosa had a far more modest following of just 3,000. Unfortunately, after the initial callouts, Mosa wiped their account and altered their bio. However, having seen the account in its initial state, I can confirm Mosa did interact with and participate in the creation of sexually explicit illustrations of underage characters. Now, I don't expect you to take me at my word, so I've taken upon myself to perform the unpleasant task of combing through archives of Mosa's Barag account hosted on the websites Gilburo and eHentai. Through my research, I was able to confirm that Mosa has drawn sexually explicit images of Hilda from the eponymous Hilda Netflix series, Cleopatra from Cleopatra in Space, Luna Loud from the Loud House, Olivia from Olivia's Magic Adventure, Nayuta from Chainsaw Man, and various other original characters of dubious ages. Now, this is all quite disturbing. However, many people were already aware of these illustrations, and due to the general permissiveness of anime-adjacent art communities and the fictional nature of the characters involved, it was hardly the smoking gun necessary to rally significant support against Mossacannibalis. What would ultimately move the needle was a piece of Rule 34 material, featuring Vicky from Fairly Odd Parents, posted with the caption, "She gets what she deserves." People were quick to point out that the wounds and signs of sexual abuse were seemingly pulled directly from the crime scene photos taken shortly after the death of Sylvia Likens. For those unaware, the murder of Sylvia Likens is a particularly famous and gruesome case from the 1960s. Sylvia was the third of 5 children, born to poor carnival workers Lester and Elizabeth. When the family fell on hard times following Elizabeth's arrest for shoplifting, Lester arranged for Sylvia and her younger sister Jenny to board with Gertrude Benishevsky, who had 7 children of her own. After the first 2 weeks, Lester would fall behind on boarding fees, and Gertrude would take out her frustration at the lack of payment by beating the 2 Likens children under her care. Over time, Gertrude's abuse would become almost exclusively focused on Sylvia. Gertrude subjected the girl to acts of physical abuse, sexual degradation, and starvation, often only allowing Sylvia to eat spoiled food from the garbage. Gertrude encouraged her children and neighborhood friends to engage in these acts of humiliation and abuse. Those who would frequent the home cut, beat, and left more than 100 cigarette burns across Sylvia's body. At one point, Gertrude forced Sylvia to strip naked and penetrate herself with a glass Pepsi bottle in full view of her children and other neighborhood teens. As signs of physical abuse became too visually apparent, Sylvia was forbidden from attending school and was moved to the basement where she was kept tied up and naked. Neighborhood children could pay 5 cents to view the display of Sylvia's naked body, and for the opportunity to cut, beat, and burn her. Sylvia eventually became malnourished to the point of incontinence and began wetting herself. Gertrude took this as yet another opportunity to punish Sylvia, forcing her to bathe in scalding water. In perhaps the most cruel act of mutilation, and the most relevant to our video, Gertrude branded Sylvia with a hot needle in words that read, "I am a prostitute and proud of it." After 3 months of unimaginable abuse, psychological torture, and starvation, Sylvia succumbed to her wounds. At the time of death, she was only 16 years old. Impartiality aside, referencing such a morbid case in Fairly Odd Parents fan art intended for sexual gratification is pretty disgusting. It's definitely a little evil-coded. Well, clearly a lot of people were not fans of this piece, as several accounts began spreading the information on Twitter, with the largest reaching over 2 million views and 30,000 likes. I will say I'm a little unsure of what the exact ignition point or catalyst was for this new push to cancel Mosa on Twitter. While the Sylvia Likens piece was seemingly new information to many on Twitter, the earliest discussion I can find of it online dates back to May of this year on Kiwi Farms. From what I can gather, a prominent creator in the paleo art community reposted one of Mosa's recent dinosaur drawings, inadvertently introducing an entire new community to the wild world of Mossacannibalis controversies. Unfortunately, the post has since been deleted, and I'm unable to speak with absolute certainty. Regardless, as pressure began to mount and followers started dropping in the thousands, Mosa privated their Twitter, paradoxically drawing even more attention to the situation. Eventually, they were forced to issue the following apology on their secondary Twitter account. I don't have words, even though I have hundreds of tongues. That was commission. I didn't know accurate information about the crime when I drew that, but there is a single room for excuse. I regret. I regret. I like to draw pics that make people suffer. I thought of such humor as real art, but I regretted now the pain that stood in front of me. Let me burn in pain that I deserve. Let me be in total abandon. Let me be full of oblivion. Truly a touching admission of guilt. However, unfortunately, during the course of my research for this video, I've discovered evidence that leads me to believe that Mosa may have not been entirely truthful in their apology. While surfing through their back catalog of not safe for work material, I found at least 2 pieces that featured wounds and signs of trauma bizarrely similar to those featured in their Sylvia Likens piece. In this illustration featuring Clary from the Summoning, the forceful insertion of beverage containers is particularly reminiscent of the abuse featured in the Sylvia Likens piece. Now, I do want to state that this is entirely speculation on my end. While as of writing this script, Mosa has not provided evidence that the works in questions were commissioned, I don't find this excuse to be entirely implausible. After all, Vicky is from a Western cartoon that I would imagine is not nearly as well known or popular amongst South Korean audiences. Then again, I'm sure there's no shortage of people who would be equally disgusted at the thought of someone making a piece of art like this in pursuit of a quick buck. Regardless, I think this situation is very fertile ground for an interesting discussion about what, if any, ethical considerations we expect from artists when depicting real-world trauma. By the way, thank you guys for sticking around to watch. As always, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. Adios.